The first time you went, it was just mind-blowing. So, this second poem is really more about Gabriel. Like a neophyte's first dive beneath the surf inside the reef, Gabriel was blown back fast by the startling rainbow spray streaming from her lovely face. The topaz glory of his presence totally eclipsed against the dazzling fire inside her skin no eye on earth had ever seen before. To me, this is quite pregnant with meaning, because he's seeing Mary, and I guess his theology was, we were at the top of the heap, but now here's Mary. So anyway, it was as if he hadn't left the firmament of heaven. When she spoke her words broke a tidal wave of ocean breakers, almost shaking Gabriel off his pins again. From above, it was like the early cardinal's clarion chime, splitting through the brooding sky with a thunderclap of joy, rinsing winter's world awake with the warm breath of spring. When the echo slowly soaked through the caverns of the deep, seeping in the bloodlines of the choral universe, the spark of eternal hope surfaced without aftershock, and the angel floated home to contemplate his descent, to recollect and retrieve his lost equilibrium. This third poem, Simeon says, the presentation, like a million teenage mothers with high hopes for her firstborn, Mary treasured every promise but puzzled through the sorrows in a tunnel of unknowing. So now the poem's going to develop on the thing she pondered these things in her heart. Though they strained her poor skin like sand, saturated flesh sank into her memory's marrow, buried underneath the grace of her ways. They dissolved behind the flash of her smile, curled inside her tongue in song, and scraped away invisibly the shavings of her joy. They sifted crevices of fear, illumined shadowlands of doubt, and clouded labyrinthine years, drifting down the soundless sea, rinsed of light and shore, until they sparkled through her tears, shining toward skyward, the cross firming her resolve to buoy his passage into glory home. Okay, so this next poem, Magdalene, emphasizes the interaction between Jesus and Magdalene at the dinner. I mean, you can, many of my poems are taken from relatively emotional moments. Well, you can imagine what an emotional moment this must have been. So it becomes worth the writing about. When her fingers touched his feet, fountains of joy erupted from her loins, rinsing arid valleys fresh like alabaster lavender, leavening the heavy air. Then she felt his startled eyes brush against her cheeks, and her throat gushed a stream of fragile notes she never heard before. He was so surprised. Such unrelenting softness against their stony stares. Her damp tresses glistening 1,000 sparks in the golden candlelight, exploded smoke and shadows of the cold banquet hall. He thought he saw flakes of manna moistening the desert dawn. Slowly, she looked up, and their faces locked in the shining of a lifetime, beyond Simon's kin and kin. I want to take one of my favorite of all time poems. It's called The Ricochet, and this is the poem about the woman who had the hemorrhage of blood, which of course in Jewish times was very unclean, and so she was an outcast. But what I think is so interesting is this is a story you got to believe it happened, because she had a plan. And she tells herself, as soon as I touch, I'm out of here. And yet, that's the most exciting moment. We'll come to it. It's called The Ricochet. After 12 years in the closet, hiding her embarrassment, exhausting every worn-out coin on every dime store healer, Jesus was her one last chance. Her plan was straightforward: just to touch his dusty coat fringe, then spin off the madding crowd, escape unnoticed, whole and new. When her fingers felt the threads, her sour flesh rinsed clean, and her spirit caromed skyward, like a gull released from earth by the first updraft of dawn, sailing beyond the firmament, beyond eyeshot, beyond herself. But then the centripetal pull of the thirst without a name, deeply burning in the marrow, reversed her flight path suddenly and arced her back toward the Messiah, searching visages of passers-by. When they met at his feet, in full earshot of the throng, she told her secret story, trembling. The woman with the sweetened loins, hemorrhaging no more, shining in the sunlight of the Savior's beaming face. This next poem is the miracle of the at the pool of Bethsaida. I think one of the purposes of this poem is to get at how Jesus must have felt when he realized he had this magic power. So the poem tries to get at what was it like for him. Now, this poem uses poetic license. I make up some things about Jesus as a boy. There's no reason to believe they haven't, but there's no reason to believe they didn't happen.